Hello and welcome back to the Everyday Joy podcast. I'm your host, Ash Owen, and I cannot wait to find moments of joy with you today. This week, I have another incredible member of our Light on Air team, Jo, on the podcast with us. Jo is full of light, full of love, and she is maybe one of the most stylish women I know. I cannot wait to chat to her today, so why don't you get comfy, get a cuppa, get your notebook, and get ready to unpack the Word of God.
Luke chapter 6 verse 38 in the ERV Bible. Jesus said, "Give to others and you will receive. You'll be given much. It will be poured into your hands, more than you can hold. You'll be given so much that it will spill into your lap. The way you give to others is the way God will give to you."
Jo.
Yes?
Welcome back to season 2 of the Everyday Joy podcast.
Thank you.
Jo, you have been an OG. And by OG, I mean you have been here since the very beginning of this podcast.
Yes.
How are you feeling? Season 2?
I know. I think it's exciting. God does so much when we, don't expect it. And it's just full of anticipation and adventure, I think.
I love it. What do you feel like is something that you've learnt about yourself, about your faith in the last year and a bit of doing this podcast?
Oh my gosh. I have learnt that faith is something that you grow in the easy times. Because when you need it, it's there. It's not something you can Pop-Tart or something that you can microwave. When you've got faith built into your soul, your very being, when you need it, it overflows. It's not something you reach and grab for in desperation. So I've learnt that it's been really great this year to have that faith deposited in all the years prior because I've used it, needed it, and loved it.
Yeah, it's so true. I literally spoke to someone about that yesterday, one of my really good friends, and she was kind of saying that she's feeling like she's in a really good moment of life, and she's like, but she kind of was like, I'm nervous because I know it's not always going to be like this. But I said to her exactly that. I was like, hey, take this moment to go, okay, I'm going to build my faith. I'm going to rest in this season. And then he just skyrockets you into all that he has in the difficult, the easy circumstances.
You don't need faith just when it's hard. You need faith in the good times as well, because faith is believing in something you don't see. And you don't have to be in a bad place to use faith. It's, God, speak to me about what to say to that friend. God, speak to me about, what I can do in my career today. Speak to me is speaking to a God you haven't been able to see but you know exists. You use faith every day. We just really use it at a point of uncomfortableness, if that's a word, when it's hard.
So true.
But faith's an everyday occurrence.
Yeah, that's so good. Oh, Jo, it's so good to have you back. Now, if we're looking at this verse in Luke 6, verse 38, it's very interesting when I read this because when I first read it, my mind kind of goes like, give to others and you will receive. Sometimes it goes to like monetary value or like what gifts you're extending to them. But interestingly enough, when I actually opened up my trusty study Bible, I'm going to read you a different version. So this is the ESV. It says, judge not and you will not be judged. Condemn not and you will not be condemned. Forgive and you will be forgiven. Give and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over. It will be put into your lap in a measure. With the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. So what's so interesting about this verse is when I first read it, it's actually more about how deeply you love other people, how deeply you are willing to forgive, to not judge. And so it's so interesting because it's kind of this thing of going, okay, it's not about money necessarily. It's not about finances. It's actually going in the measure that you're willing to forgive, to show grace, to show compassion, that's what will be given back to you.
Yeah. It also shows the reaping and sowing, But also as you say that, Ash, it makes me think that when you have that disposition of forgiveness, I think you have an openness and freedom to receive.
Yeah.
You block your own blessing by hardening your heart. So having a hardened heart to judge or having some bitterness or having, it's like growing stale. It's like taking the life out of your being, and therefore you're not able to receive. You've got no ability, and it's just because you've got that closed perspective. So we determine. It's when you forgive. It's when you're happy. It's when you have that malleable spirit that you can receive.
Yeah.
If a bucket's cracked, the receiving leaks.
Totally.
But when the bucket is healthy, it can contain.
And I think you've nailed it on the head, because forgiveness actually is a choice. It's not just going to magically happen to us often, sometimes, but that's like the 1%. Forgiveness is a decision, and often has to happen before you encounter the awkward or bad scenario, right?
Oh, yes.
It's a heart posture to go, okay, I'm willing to forgive. I'm willing to extend, grace. And it's hard. It's not always easy.
No, but if I can tell you something that I do, a little trick that I do, is that I am big on imagination and creativity. But if I've got something difficult that I have to do, I go there before I do it. So I'll imagine talking to that friend about something that hurt, and I've already done it before I do it. So the thing is that I'm very big on, if you can't see something with your eyes closed, you won't do it or see it with your eyes open. So go on a journey in your mind to release that person, to free that person. And when you get there, you've already done it. You're just carrying out that which you've decided. And it's very precious.
Yeah.
But if I can bring one more point to this scripture, it says, you'll receive having it poured into your hands and spilling into your lap. Now, if you put your hands in front of you while you're standing, it would go on the floor. But you're in a posture of sitting. You're resting.
Yeah.
It's a position of rest that you give.
Yeah.
And that's the cheerful spirit. It's not a position of striving. It's not a position of angst. You sit, you hold your hands out, and you give. And it pours into your hands and overflows to your lap. That means you're at rest.
Yeah, at rest and in surrender almost. Yeah. You're in surrender going, okay, God, this is your world. This is the life you have given me. So I'm going to extend that grace and love and forgiveness. And when I read it, it just shows me that, when I kind of pictured this, I imagine when it talks about, God will give this to you. God extended the greatest gift of forgiveness he could have possibly given when he sent us Jesus, right? And sometimes when I have had moments in my life of those bubbling feelings of anger or unforgiveness, I reflect on the goodness of God's forgiveness and the goodness of his grace, and I go, how can I not forgive? How can I not at least try to extend grace when the King of Kings literally did that for me? It's such a humbling moment. Like you said, like when you sit, when you kneel, when you sit there with your hands, it's a humbling experience because you're willing to say, okay, I'm going to let my anger and my frustration and my disappointment go because it's not worth holding on to that unforgiveness. And it's not always easy, like we said. Sometimes it's difficult. But there is something about when we're willing to release it, you also understand even deeper the forgiveness that God gives to us. When you actively work out and experience what it looks like, not that we can, compare to what Jesus did for us, but it is that moment of, oh, it makes sense, like I get it. Is there a time in your life where this verse has come alive, Jo?
I think it's been a very big thing for me. When I've been discouraged, I go and text a lot of people or connect with a lot of people and encourage them. And then what happens is I receive more encouragement that I gave out. And so whatever you're needing today, give it away and watch it come back and pour into your lap, because you can't outgive a God who gives more than you or I put together.
Yeah, that is so true. I think when I think about it, I had a scenario recently where there's just a couple of scenarios where I was just struggling to forgive. And, I felt like, what's the word? Justly upset. And in the sense of I was like, I should be allowed to be upset at this scenario, right? And sometimes I think when I am in that headspace, sometimes I don't necessarily want to take it to God, because I know that the minute that I do, he's going to be like, you need to deal with that unforgiveness.
Before you get there.
Yeah, and I'm like, I don't want to deal with it yet. Let me be frustrated for a little bit. But in this moment that I had, there were two people, and I just so desperately needed to forgive them. And I knew I needed to because I thought about the scenario every day, like every single day. Every time someone was like, what's going on in your life? That was like the thing that was kind of grinding my gears. And I remember I had this moment of, I was having a quiet time, and I felt like for the last few weeks, I just felt so restless, so uneasy almost. And I had this moment with the Lord where I was like, God, why am I not feeling this peace? Why do I feel so chaotic right now? And I just felt like the Lord said, it's because you're not willing to forgive them. You're harboring this anger and frustration in your heart. And I in that moment, I was like, oh man, yeah, I need to extend that generosity and that forgiveness. And in that moment, I literally went, okay, I prayed some prayers. I tried to forgive them, and, forgiveness and grace and being unjudgmental, they're not necessarily click your fingers and it's all fixed sort of scenarios. But in that moment, it was a situation of it released me. That's the kind of pouring back into you that this verse is talking about. When I released them from my unforgiveness, it released me from those frustrations and disappointments. And no joke, within 24 hours, I hadn't spoken to them again. Both of them, one of them called me, one of them messaged me and asked to organize to catch up.
Yeah, wow.
And it's like, and look, that doesn't happen every time. However, it was such a visual for me to go, this is the cause and effect of forgiveness, the cause and effect of not being judgmental, the cause and effect of releasing it to Jesus. And there's so much power in it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm so glad that we have a whole week to chat, Jo. We get to unpack the words to live by each and every day. I am so ready to dive into all that God has for us this week and this year. I cannot wait to chat to you tomorrow in another episode of the Everyday Joy podcast, and I pray that you have an incredible day.